component or one intervention from the largest digital health station. So then there is an expectation now that the supply chain information system is part of the larger picture for the health, for digital health. So again, this is more of a trend, and as you can see here, there is also interoperability is expected between the supply chain system and the other health information system. One thing that we heard a little bit about it yesterday from the Julia White presentation, there is more and more now demand and appreciation for data analytics, for what we can call it a control tower or visibility analytical networks. Again, the whole idea now that we have more and more of the country have a wealth of data, and you can need to have more of utilization and analysis of this data to drive decision making. So these three trends, the complexity of supply chain information system, the expected interoperability with the larger digital health, and the more need of data analytics and control tower, they are trends that we are seeing more and more in countries. These three trends is having also three major challenges that is faced in country system. We have huge problem in master data management, and I think yesterday and we'll hear today again that there is a common problem in what we call it the product master data, and how that now, because we have multiple systems, they all need to define the product in a unique way. They need to be the same all across these different systems. So master data management is a big challenge. There is also now a big challenge in terms of the data quality. I think a lot of systems are suffering from poor data quality, and what type of control does need to be done for data quality. And of course, we have a big interoperability challenge with more of system being in place. With this trend and with this challenge, we really need to start thinking about some of the critical foundation that need to be in place in the country system to support both supply chain information system and also the future track and trace. So here, this is where I would like to thank also my colleague Sarouf from PSM. We try to start to formulate more what do we mean by the end-to-end data visibility and versus track and trace, and how they are interact, what they have in common, and what's their difference. So from our end, when we talk about the end-to-end data visibility, we really try to differentiate in three layers. We have an operational layer. This is where, with the movement of commodity, you also would like to know the information, the flow of information with the flow of commodity. This is where from the manufacturer, where it go to the country, and then to central medical store, and districts, and then to the end facility. But also we have another level above it, that while we are tracking this movement of commodity, there's also another component, which is what is the procurement, what you procured, what is the upcoming shipment, and we need to know also not just what we have, but what's coming and what we procure. And then there is the other component that we all have a lot of struggle, is the forecasting and the supply planning. So when we talk about the end-to-end data visibility, it is basically how to link vertically these three systems, from the forecasting, supply planning, to what you have in procurement, and what you really have in stock. And this is what we always was referring at the end-to-end data visibility. At this level, in some of the simple systems, we can just end by knowing what is the stock in hand in the different warehouse and different location. But then if we take it furthermore, when systems get more advanced, you start to have more of the traceability. Now you have the expiry, you have the batch number, you can start to have some capability of batch level traceability. And then in the future, when there is serial number and so on, you can have traceability through serialization. But as said, from whether you are focusing on the end-to-end data visibility or focusing on the track and trace, there is a common foundation that is needed for both systems. So three main foundations that are really needed here. First, as I mentioned, the product master. We really need to have more and more, it becomes very critical to have the unique identification for a product. And when I talk about product master, we're basically talking about three things. The unique identification for a product, what we call the product information or product attribute, what can be, it can be several hundred of product attribute that define the product. And then also, if we're going to have any kind of classification, which can combine similar products under some specific classification. So this is what, and we'll talk more about it, but this is what we refer to the identification or the GDSN piece. We also need to start putting the foundation to enable more of the automatic data capture through barcoding and so on, because I personally believe that this is the only way that we can, or this is one of the critical methods to start controlling more or addressing more of the data quality aspect. So we need to start having the foundation to be able to use barcode in our warehouse and in the movement of commodity. And then, of course, we need to have a strong foundation based on standards to address data exchange and interoperability, both between the system where the commodity is moving and also vertically between the system like the warehouse management, procurement, forecasting, and so on. So it is not coincidence, but you can see these three problems are matching very well with what GS1 set of standards, identify, capture, and share. And again, I started like 4 years ago. I have no idea about GS1. USAID have no idea about GS1. And our interest started more from the system perspective. We have been helping countries in developing their information system. And we start seeing the problem of not having standard. And the first direction where we found GS1 was saying, no, there should be standard up there that should solve the problem that we're seeing. And this is where we start to looking, okay, what's happening in the private sector, what's happening in the rest of the world, what standard that this system need to be based on. And this is we got with you and GS1, and we started our journey. So I think one of the, I said that we have these three foundations, but I truly believe that the starting point is really to have one product master that can be available to all donors country. There have been similar efforts going with digital health in defining the master facility list. But for master facility list, this data is coming from the country and it's different from country to country. I think what we have here a better opportunity for collaboration because the manufacturer is the one that owning the product information. And if we can have a mechanism where if the manufacturer capture the data, make it available, enter it once, and then it can be available to all of us, I think this can be a huge benefit. Not just from the supply chain, but also from the supply chain and from the overall digital health initiative. So, and this is where the whole idea of the GDSN, and I think there is few more sessions after that about talking about the global data synchronization network. And again, it is very critical need now to have an authoritative source which can always be updated and maintained, and all of us can refer back to it for the information of the product information. Again, this is the whole idea here. If we are able to have this mechanism where supplier and manufacturer can help us to enter data once, but they don't need to do it just for Ethiopia or just for USAID or just for UNFPA, they just do it once, hopefully entering in the GDSN, and after that, we all can use it. So the problem from PSM, we have a subscription in GDSN. We are facing one main problem there that most of our data is not there yet. So we really need to have collaboration all together with the manufacturer. And again, it will be much easier if we are all aligned in the need. We may need to start also having more analysis on what can be the operational and the financial impact on subscription to the GDSN. But regardless of what will be the solution, I think we really urgently, in my opinion, need to have work on this common product master. I know several countries right now, they are doing a lot of effort in cleaning their product master, in identifying it, but for the purpose of RMS. But again, whatever effort is done there, it should be leveraged for other countries, it should be leveraged for other systems in the country also. And before digging more there, I just want to share with you, because again, we're trying, like, one of the hope of this conference is really bringing what's happening from the GS1, from the advanced track and trace system, to also what we are facing in logistic management information system. And I know that in a lot of conferences in GS1, there have been always a lot of focus also on the endpoint and the patient. So we all know that our target is really the patient, but when we are designing and when we are trying to apply this in our environment, we also need not to forget the challenge that we have on the last mile. So I just would like to share with you a quick video, and thanks to RHSC video about the last mile, because knowing the environment where our patient exists, I think it will be very helpful when we start designing and start to have our common discussion here. So if you can see this quick video. I'm not sure if the sound is working. I think it's not working, the sound. I love technology, so.
The last mile might stretch 3 miles, or 10 kilometers, or more. It could be a main road. More often, though, it is a dirt track. But the last mile is more than its topography. It is the critical, final link of a supply chain. In healthcare, the last mile is about getting life-saving products from a warehouse to a community-based health outlet, or from that outlet into the hands of the woman who has walked half a day to get her medication. But the last mile is also the most fragile part of the supply chain. Transportation breaks down. Power cuts out. Refrigeration fails. Forecasts turn out wrong. Stocks run out. Communications are unreliable. Bad weather puts facilities out of reach. Staff lack training. They're overburdened. Salaries are low. Motivation falters. There is no quick fix to strengthen the last mile, and no single agency can do it alone. It takes dedicated partners to resolve to innovate together and to share solutions so that all women everywhere can access their choice of quality reproductive health products, because it is their right.
So I really would like to take this opportunity to see that even if we are working on more of the longer term vision and the national level track and trace, there is also things that we can start to do now to build the foundation for data visibility, and also which will help the track and trace. So this is more quick view about data visibility from the country perspective. I would like now to invite my colleague Nuno to talk more about what's happening from the donor side in terms of data visibility. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nono from UNFPA Copenhagen. Thank you so much for being here, and very humbled to be in front of all of you. So I'll just try to get to my slide. And I'll try to share the perspective of the donor agencies and the challenges that we have in the supply chain systems. My background is in IT, so I'll try to bridge the gap and try to get a little bit higher on the business side, but try to bring forward some of the challenges that we have. The end-to-end supply chain management visibility has been talked about, but I'll try to bring another perspective to this. Some of the challenges that we have is financial constraints that we have as donor agencies. In the shrinking areas of funding, we have challenges. There's need from the donor for justification to the taxpayers, and that is really bringing business to be more accurate in whatever we're delivering. This is pushing for supply chain business optimization, and therefore the system optimization, and is another perspective to trying to address this issue of end-to-end. Just a sort of an overview. We have the different processes, right from the planning, sourcing, the manufacturing, logistic receiving down to the country warehouse management system and the health management system. Now, on the physical side, the demand planning happens, the sourcing goes on, there's different manufacturing, packaging that goes into the containers, transportation, breaking down into the country. From our perspective, right now, the only connection that we have is the sourcing and the ordering, because that is something that we control and we manage as a donor agency. We manage that. The rest of it is dotted. It would help us to connect all of this, but the challenges we have is that there are a lot of silos. They're just really, I think Rami had really outlined some of the high areas of master data. Those are the areas that we really have a huge challenge in bridging the gap. Just a high level of the manufacturing agencies and the country. There's no standard right now. We have branded items. We have generic items that we supply on. With the manufacturers right now, the master data, how we handle, is all manual. We get information from them as in emails. We input that into the system. And then all of the transaction, whenever there's no order, it goes completely over email. So of course, the challenge is that we cannot get beyond that. And this is what goes on the countryside. Of course, you're able to access some of our web catalogs. It's completely relying on manual information. And then the rest is an email again. So internally, we have challenge because our internal IT landscapes are not really up for it. We have a lot of legacy systems in place. The business need alignment even within our own organization. And this is all because there's a lack of product and data exchange standards. This is a huge challenge just internally within our own organizations. Facing the manufacturers, again, we have a global setting. We cannot just select, as a public sector procurement agencies, we cannot just select a single company to do business with, unlike the business world. We have to deal with, as a fair play, we have to deal with manufacturers globally. So we have a challenge of a global setting. With the global setting comes the challenge of, again, lack of product and master data exchange standards. So we have to deal with all the manufacturers completely in the different scenarios. Working again in the country, again, with the global settings, we have, of course, the challenges of the political and the scale, again, the standards. So again, it's back to standards where we are not able to, we have to invest huge to customize at every angle, and it's not sustainable. I'll just try to relate to the slide that Rami had gone over about the product identity and master, and the GS1's response to that. In the product identity and the master data, I think Rami had gone really clearly on his slides on the challenges we have. The product information, that is basically the identity, the registration in the country. That's a huge challenge because every product we bring, in order to be efficient in the supply chain, we need to ensure that that product is actually registered in the country. And that information right now, from GS1's perspective, it's addressed in the master data. In part of the on the GS1, the GDSN, it's actually addressed in that. So every commodity, pharmaceutical product that is actually registered in a country is actually part of the master data. That brings as Rami had briefly mentioned, there's the physical dimension, the logistic unit, the ingredients of the product. Those are all within the master data. So it becomes actually one of the central piece of any automation is to have a solid master data. The next is the label and the barcode he mentioned during one of his slides. In that right now, we have a challenge because we are not consistently using the barcode that's on the product. Manufacturers have that already in place, but we don't use it. So quite often we find ourselves either we don't use it, or there's a reassignment of it, or at worst, we've had cases where in some of our country in Asia have actually recreated it. So every package that arrives, they actually go through their system, they have a warehouse management system, and apply a new barcode, having another duplicate system going on the side. So this is a kind of the huge challenges we have on the label and the barcode. This from an GS1 is again part of the one of the GS1 slides which had about capture. It's actually again a standardization so that you don't actually duplicate that, but you reuse exactly what the manufacturer has actually put in place on the packages. Then comes the data exchange. This is the area that actually you need to be able to exchange, connect to the master data. You need to be able to connect to each of the manufacturers to get information like the batch and the lot information. So from a perspective of recall, you need to have the batch and lot information. You need to have the expiry dates. All of the data exchange actually is all of the information that goes connecting with the logistic companies, the manufacturing, the master data. It hinges on the master data, on the data exchange, and that from a GS1 perspective. They have in place the master data and the data sharing standards as well. And then finally, in the end-to-end and last mile, which is actually the huge challenge. Currently, of course, we don't have. There's a huge area of a gap because we do not have very clear outline how to approach this. So GS1 has another standard called EPCIS, which is actually event data, which is again streamlined and has a very consistent way of being able to identify the event along the supply chain. So from a GS1 perspective, that has helped us actually understand how we can actually get better at this, is that the product is seen as the product itself has palletization. It's all very clear and it's very easy for us to understand and to go forward in the implementation. So we are currently working with manufacturers to really start to build this up so that we, again, as we mentioned in the previous slide, that we don't have to go ahead and reassign, recreate barcodes, but trying to utilize, based on the standard, trying to use the G10s and have it as a unique universal identifier. The product master, of course, has informations related to the product description, the dimension, the classification, the logistic unit, storage information, and then faction, which is actually what we call sometimes referred to as advanced shipping notice, which actually has the batch lot, the expiry dates, which are really the critical information with every order. And this is all within the GS1, which gives us this opportunity of actually streamlining. So regardless of which manufacturer we work with or which country we work with, if we all start to standardize on that, the data communication gets very easy. When we talk about apples, we can talk we can talk apples to apples rather than having a mixed communication where then it breaks down. And so this is one of the areas that we think we've really learned. And this is just a high-level end objective, kind of an end objective based on the GS1 solutions, where first of all, you have the product identity. Just to simplify, you have the manufacturing, the donor agency system, and the country systems in place. You have the master data that actually sits on the internet where you can actually access. Of course, there's security in place. And if you have the access to it, the master data is then pushed out through the manufacturers. It's accessed by anybody downstream. So that same consistent data, that unique G10 with its associated data, all of the descriptions, the unit of measure, the logistic information is accessible by anybody downstream. Then it gives the possibility of actually having transaction data, which there are several transaction data, but what we are referring to is the advanced shipping notice, which actually has the batch and lot information going down into the system. And then the goods follow after that, and then gives the possibility of the automations like barcode that can capture events. And of course, they can be data exchange between the country and the donor systems, and then giving the ability to have an end-to-end, what GS1 calls as event data in the end. So this is sort of just a high level of what we see, how we can apply the GS1 standard to our whole supply chain, trying to address the issues and the challenges that we currently face. This also gives us another thought that the possibilities of that master data, this is just another model that the possibilities of actually, as different agencies together, currently the government, of course, has a challenge that for every, for immunization data, they need to turn to UNICEF. For certain reproductive health, they need to turn to either USAID and UNFPA. With a standard, it is possible that we can actually have a single hub, and the government can actually have a single potential hub to actually obtain the master data and the transaction data, thereby actually reducing the overhead. So I think the big point I want to make here is actually it could reduce cost, complexity, and have a single source of data for the government, provided that everybody is actually using the same standard to the points to remember. Currently, we're grateful to USAID for this partnering that we have been working with implementation of GS1 just for a few category of products. And some of the points to remember, especially now that the government is also taking on board the standard going forward, we've had some challenges, of course, in non-core commodities. Basically, what I mean by that is that it's a huge lift. And so when we're buying products that is outside of the core commodities, to get them on is a challenge. So one needs to be aware that if you want to go ahead with this, you need to put in effort and weigh in on that. There's also a challenge that global supply base it's a challenge because there are some countries, some of the suppliers in some countries are not really aware of this GS1. So we need to, again, work very closely with GS1, get their support, and then to educate some of the manufacturers to get on board as well. Dealing with wholesalers is also another challenge because at the end, GS1 is based on authenticity of a product. So the serial number, the G10, is actually assigned by the manufacturer, not by the wholesaler. So those are some of the challenges we've had. And then the last bit is that there's a huge impact on business resource as well as the technology dependence. So it is an engagement of senior managers to buy in, to make sure that they are actually on board and understand the impact and the benefit of it. There's also from a benefit for donors and donor agencies, we see that there's an enhancement. It adds to this unique identification. I'm sort of repeating myself again on this identification. It streamlines on the business, on the data exchange. It's leading to automation and accuracy eventually. And then one of the points that a lot of my colleagues in Copenhagen talk about is really, and USAID, we talk about is forecast. A system like that in place would really benefit forecast. And this is one of the things that when we engage with manufacturers, they need to know what is our forecast. And in the donor agencies, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that the forecast is dependent on funding. It's not like the regular market where it's driven by demand. So that's a huge challenge. But even to get to that, we need to get our numbers correct. And to get the numbers correct, we all need to be on the same standard. Otherwise, we just cannot even get that to our manufacturers. I know that there's been many manufacturers here, and they're challenged with trying to, because they work on a different segment of the market. They're working for donor agencies, so they have a bit of the corporate responsibility as well, and they need, they really lower themselves to be able to help us. And so in order to help them, we need to get better at forecasting. And then finally, I would also reiterate that for the donor agencies, one of the big benefits would be if we're able to get all of this information correctly, it actually helps donors support us, because then it increases their willingness to help when we're able to be very accurate with our numbers, because they need to report back to their taxpayers. So in order for us to get that, it's sort of a cycle in a way. So we need to get the cycle all tied up. And the assumption, of course, it's based on that we have a GS1 implemented. In the in-country, we have certain things like we've heard again, the in-country WAN, the global WAN, the ELMI systems that you all have in place in the government, the HMIs, the health management systems that do the data capturing. We need those in place because it's all depend on the complete connection of the different systems downstream. The benefit of the government, what we think it will do, is enhance the product identification, the data exchange, and automation and accuracy. Again, it's a repetitive, I think, benefit. It, of course, helps in the recall detection of inefficiencies like the leakages. It would help. And here I would just want to point out that I think the GS1, the barcoding systems and all of the data exchange is really not the end. It's just the means. So we need to understand that it will help address some of the falsification, but it's not the end, and we will need to work. I think there's the whole area that it's not just the systems, it's the processes, the regulatory bodies, it all needs to come in together to address that issue of falsification, which was brought up yesterday as well. And then the last bit is, again, the willingness from donors to support will really benefit that if we are able to get those numbers up correct, have a much more tighter control over the supply chain. And the assumption, of course, is that we need to have standard implemented and the systems in place. And with that, I'd just like to end and say thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you for this great presentation and really showing how the implementation will help really everybody. I liked really the just one stance are just a means to really achieve more than. Thank you. Now I invite the next speaker to the stage, and there is a change to the printed program. We were not able, the minister to join us, but I think we might have a very interesting speaker for you because it's somebody from Africa. So from Frederick Vagnoni, the CEO of KEMSA, to the stage, if he's there. Yes, there he is, to talk about the implementation, which
Thank you very much. My name is Alfred Wanyonyi. I'm the acting CEO of KEMSA. All protocols observed. I was actually meant to be here at 3:30, and that's why I was a bit hesitant when my name was called out. But at least I can make my presentation now. In KEMSA, we too procure for quite a number of bodies. We procure for the national government. We also procure under the MCP of America. MCP is Medical Commodities Project. It's a five-year project, and it's costing about 650 million USD. We also do storage, warehousing, and distribution for UNICEF. In totality, we are moving, our throughput is about per annum, and GSI, special barcoding, is quite key in ensuring that we move, we store, and of course distribute commodities that are of high quality. Just in a nutshell, we are a medical logistics management corporation in the country. And as I've already said, our mandate is to procure a warehouse and, of course, distribute commodities to facilities countrywide. We are talking about 6,000 public health facilities. We are also distributing to about 5,000 testing HIV sites within the country. And basically, our mandate is broadly procurement, warehousing, distribution, and managing supply chain services. This is an experience I think we felt we needed to share with you so that you can appreciate the experiences in one of the African countries. So we normally ensure that we procure high quality and cost-effective commodities and deliver the same at the points, the health facilities, as I've already said. And of course, one of the key deliverables and assessed to be given this particular responsibility was the fact that our systems, especially in terms of ensuring quality and all that, were in place. And apart from procuring for, as I said, procuring for the strategic partners, we also do procure for Global Fund. And Global Fund is addressing the 3 key diseases, as you know. And all these particular systems require that we do procure quality and distribute the same. So we have an ERP system in place. We are leveraging on technology to ensure that that we deliver quality to our customers. And one of the things we've done is that within the ICT ERP system, we have a portal that interacts with the GSI 1. And of course, as you can see, all our business processes are automated and of course integrated. And we have within the ERP system mobile applications, e-tools, and self-service service portals. We have an LMIS in place, that's Logistic Management Information Systems, that once the goods come to KEMSA, and of course distributed countrywide, we collect that particular information, and out of it we make reports that are then particularly used by the government, donor agencies, strategic partners, county governments to make decisions in terms of requirements that are of course related to quantification and forecasting. And more so, all our suppliers, all our manufacturers, whether they're coming from abroad or within the country, are supposed to do what we call packaging of this particular commodity. So we are implementing some components related to GSI1, and we are using the ERP and ICT to ensure that that particular component really works up to the delivery point of the health facility. So once the commodities come from the manufacturer, they are received within our warehouse. We maintain visibility of the same commodities through the GPS right up to the facilities. From the facilities is what we are now lacking. And I think going forward and learning from this particular congregation, I think what the government is doing, and I think we are in the government of Kenya is rolling out what is universal health coverage. There's an ICT highway that is also being created in the country. And we want the visibility of these particular commodities right from the manufacturer, going to KEMSA, to the facilities, to the patient, to be visible enough using GSI1. So before we adopted GSI1, we had attempted to do our own barcodes. And on 1st July 2014, we became a member through our GSI Kenya, who are well happily represented here. So we have signed a contract with GSI. And of course, we have, as I've already told you earlier, we upgraded our ERP system to accommodate the same. And the GSI is now a mandatory requirement when we do tender documents. And GSI has enabled us, as I've already told you, to procure for strategic partners. We're also procuring for not only Global Fund, but World Bank as well. So adopting GSI, as previous speakers have said, will enable you to interact very easily with donor agencies and strategic partners, because they want visibility of their commodities within the supply chain. And that's exactly what we are doing, and I think we stand here to give that particular testimony and share those particular experiences with you. I don't want to go back to traceability. I think it's already been defined. The barcoding that we normally use is the GSI barcoding. I don't have to go through that. I think you have already gone through that. And of course, you can see from supplier, we do e-procurement within our ERP system. We have a module for e-procurement. So right from development of the tender documents, we leverage on the e-procurement module within the ERP. And then, of course, there is, when at the receipt inventory management system, we have a warehousing module that then would receive all these particular commodities. And we also do have a distribution module, of course, also leveraging on GPS when you are distributing the commodities. We wanted just to share that particular experience that we are implementing the barcoding system, and of course we have impressed GSI1 in our all processes. I don't need to go through that. I think you have previous speakers have already demonstrated that. And of course, you can see the benefits that we have actually through our own experience. We capture data in a very fast and accurate manner at every point in the supply chain. We can now trace our commodities, and of course, as it has already been said, we can easily effect recalls and replacements from our manufacturers. We have less stock holding and less wastages. We have a better control over distribution and storage. And then, of course, we have fewer errors in the recognition of goods. And we have improved communication throughout the supply chain. And of course, we have a lot of donor confidence in our systems. And previously, in 2009, we used to have all manner of supply chain. We were having the Americans supporting the system through their own supply chain. We had UNICEF, we had the Kenyan government, we had all other strategic partners doing their procurement and supplying, so that you will find one product that has actually been brought in the supply chain by various strategic partners expiring because they were not talking to each other. But with this kind of systems, we now procure as a one shop for all the strategic partners and the government. And I would urge all people within the room, especially our brothers from other countries, to embrace GSI1. You can see our strategic partners, they're quite a number. And we are now the only organization actually in either warehousing for them or procuring on their behalf because of the systems we have put in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting that there is implementation of GS1 in Africa already. And you are around for the coffee break and questions, I assume. As due to time, I would in the moment like to progress to the next speaker who is coming to us from far away. I'm very grateful that Mrs. Hye Kyung Kim, who is the Deputy Director of the Korean Pharmaceutical Information Service, has really traveled far to share with us what Korea has done in implementation traceability. We wanted to show you really that there are countries who have put this in place already, and Korea is one of them. And I know that for you also the English language is a concern, so I told her before that we are all here together and are not perfect in English. So thank you so very much for joining us today. This is the clicker. Can you see the screen also there? Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hye Kyung Kim from South Korea. I work in Korea Pharmaceutical Information Service Center of HIRA, Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service. It's a great honor to introduce Korea pharmaceutical serialization and traceability system in African GSO healthcare conference. Since 2000, the pharmaceutical companies in South Korea have assigned code to drugs on their own ways. However, without standardization, not only is it difficult to manage distribution, the barcode alone could not guarantee the citizens the stability of the medication. So, Ministry of Food and Drug Safety and the Ministry of Health and Welfare decided to introduce a national standardization system. The most important thing is the standardization. I will explain in detail later on. From now, I will introduce the pharmaceutical serialization and traceability system in South Korea. First, I would like to give a brief Korea Pharmaceutical Information Service Center. The Korea Pharmaceutical Information Service Center is called as KPIS. And then I will explain about the standardization of pharmaceutical information and the pharmaceutical standard serialization system and the utilization of pharmaceutical distribution information. KPIS was established in October 2007 to manage the difficult distribution of drug-related information to create a transparent drug distribution system. According to the Pharmaceutical Affairs Act in South Korea, KPIS collects information on production, import, and supply of drugs. KPIS has three functions. First, KPIS assigned the Korea drug code to all distributed drugs in South Korea to standardize pharmaceutical information. We also manage that barcode and RFID tags are properly marked. The second function is the collection and the management of pharmaceutical distribution information. Lastly, KPIs generate public value by utilizing pharmaceutical distribution information in various areas such as policy making and R&D. Next, I am going to talk about pharmaceutical information standardization in South Korea. In South Korea, pharmaceutical standardization codes are referred to as the Korea Drug Code or KD code. KD code follows Global Trade Item Number 13 system. KD code consists of 13 digits, 3 digits for country code, 4 digits for company code, 5 digits for item reference, and 1 digit per check digit. Among these digits, company number and item reference are used at National Health Insurance Medicines Expense Claim Code. This slide shows the process of assigning a KD code. Pharmaceutical companies are assigned code from GSO Korea. A pharmaceutical company applies for KD code at KPIS of all drug products within 30 days of Ministry of Food and Drug Safety approval. After that, KPIS assign and notify KD code on the KPIS homepage within 10 days. This slide shows the KD code application. KD code is assigned to all drug distributors in South Korea. All drug distributors in South Korea should be applied with a barcode or RFID tags which hold the KD code. And KD code is used when distributors report production, import, and distribution to KPIS. This slide shows you a story of introducing global standardization system into a barcode in South Korea. The mandatory barcode application for drugs began in 2000, but pharmaceutical companies marked their one barcode, so there was a difference between wholesalers. Therefore, in 2008, we introduced the global standardization system for traceability because it was hard to track distribution and it was difficult to manage transactions. We assigned the KD code according to the G13 system, which must be marked on the barcode or RFID tags of all drugs. In 2013, we introduced the GSN 128 system for ETH drugs or prescription drugs, which include a KD code, expression data, and lot or batch number and serial number. Since 2015, it became mandatory to apply the serial number to a barcode for ETC or prescription drugs. OTC drugs or over-the-counter drugs may be marked as a G1013 system, but it can also be marked as a GSN 128 system. This is the regulation that marks barcode of ETC or prescription drugs. Prescription drugs must follow the GSN 128 system using the application identifier. Identifier is marked in parentheses. 01 is a KD code, 17 is a expire date, 10 is a batch number, and 21 is a serial number. Serialization is not mandatory for OTC drugs and ETC drugs such as fluids. For example, this is the first picture barcode of ETC drugs. KD code is 880-6411-23459 and lot number is A12345. Expression date is December 31st in 2018 and the serial number is B123456789. This is the regulation that marks barcode of OTC drugs. OTC drugs may be marked on your KD code using a barcode according to G1013 system. OTC drug can also be marked according to GSN 128 system. Next, I'm going to talk about National Pharmaceutical Serialization System. National Pharmaceutical Serialization System enables to track and trace the passage of drugs from production, import, distribution, and consumption by identifying a unique serial number on each drug packages. Therefore, it can prevent counterfeit and illegal drugs from entering supply chain, and drug with the issue can be withdrawn from the market before consumption, which will create a safer pharmaceutical environment. The distribution route will be more clearly identified on each transaction, which will make the distribution process transparent and prevent unlawful practices. This slide shows the story of pharmaceutical serialization system implementation. In 2008, pharmaceutical transaction record began to be reported to KPIS. In 2011, Ministry of Health and Welfare notified the introduction of pharmaceutical serialization system starting from 2016. For about 5 years, KPIS and pharmaceutical companies and wholesalers cooperate to apply the serialization system. From July 1st in 2016, manufacturers and importers had to report their transaction record with the serial number at the time of shipping when they distribute prescription drugs. From July 1st in 2017, wholesalers had to report their transaction record with the serial number at the time of shipping when they distribute prescription drugs. As of 2018, all drug distributors in South Korea have mandatory to report their transaction record when they distribute prescription drugs, including information of serial number. But for outage drugs, they may be reported by the end of the next month. This picture shows the track and trace system based on serial number. If you see the circle number 1, manufacturer or importer supply drug from serial number 1 to 5 to the wholesaler and report the transaction record at the time of shipping. Next, if you see the circle number 2, wholesaler A supplies wholesaler B with serial number 1 and 2 and drug 3 and 4 to the pharmacy. After distributor, wholesaler A reports the transaction record at the time of shipping. If you look at the circle number 3, wholesaler B bought the serial number 1 and 2 from wholesaler A. Among them, wholesaler B supplied drug 1 to the pharmacy and that wholesaler didn't sell the drug number 2 and it remains as a stock. As a result, serial number 1, 3, 4, 5 was supplied to the pharmacy, which is the consumer among the drug of serial number 1, 2, 5, supplied by manufacturer or importer, and wholesaler B still has drug 2. The pharmacy provides drugs to patients and claims the expenses of drug to HIRA. As you see, pharmaceutical serialization system can track and trace the transaction route of all distributed drugs. I'll explain the implementation of pharmaceutical serialization system. All supplies of drugs, such as manufacturer and importer and wholesaler, should report when transaction occur. They report KD code, serialization number, and expiration date, lot or batch number, supply amount, and the unit price things. Transaction data of prescription drugs should be reported at the time of shipping. Data of outage drug can be reported by the end of the next month of transaction. Transaction data all drug should be reported by KPI's web portal. Distributor can upload files through either a ESP agent or the web portal. They can also input data directly on the web portal. This slide shows the linkage of drug distribution. When manufacturers and importers provide ETC or prescription drugs, they have to report the transaction record, including a serial number at the time of shipping. Wholesaler provide the drugs, they also report the transaction record to KPIs. Wholesaler have to report them, including serial number at the time of shipping when they provide the ETC or prescription drugs. KPIs provide the information on the transaction record provided by the manufacturer and the importer and the wholesaler. As you see the flows, KPIs strives to ensure accurate distribution between the suppliers and the recipient by providing the information at every step of drug supply. As you can see, pharmaceutical transaction data are saved in the database of HIRA's KPIs. The drug distribution data are currently provided to support the policy making of the government and R&D or pharmaceutical companies. Also, these data are provided for the statistics of OECD and HIRA's review and assessment service. In 2017, more than 300 data items were processed and provided. I have given a presentation about the pharmaceutical sterilization and traceability system in South Korea so far. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email address is written on the bottom side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think it's important to see that this is something which is really happening. It's not something which we are dreaming up. And I must say, countries like Korea and others have led the way and have also prepared the way that other countries can now implement quicker, because you have seen a long time until Korea got there. These timelines can be shorter today, as we discussed yesterday in our traceability sessions. It doesn't need to be the long timelines anymore. It doesn't need to be very short timelines, because there is infrastructure and everything which has to be built. Thank you very much. I know that, but I think everybody who has a question, please send her an email. They're very happy to answer. I thought we'd get a little bit of action as we are back on time. To get you all moving. And Chris from Gavi made yesterday a very good suggestion to me to really, there you are, Chris, thank you. I modified it a little bit, your suggestions, but he suggested that we see who is really attending this conference. So can I ask you to get up? If you are, I'm starting with a regulatory body or policymaker. Can you please get up? That is good, it's moving a little bit. Regulatory body, policy maker. Great. Thank you so much. If you can sit down again. Can you get up if you are falling under the category of a donor or development partner? Thank you very much. The next category I have is if you are an implementation partner, a solution provider. Could you get up, please? The next one I have is the representative of the sectors, so manufacturers, wholesalers, hospitals. If you could please get up. It doesn't matter, global, local, wherever you come from. And last, standards organization. I know that it's not only GS1 here, but other standards organization. So if you could get up. Standards organization. Chuck, yeah, definitely. Okay, so Chris, I hope that gave you a little bit, and everybody a little bit of a view who is attending this conference. And with that, we move back to our host country, and it's a great pleasure to invite the Deputy Director General of IFM-HACA, Heron Gabra, to talk about the plans in Ethiopia. Heron, there you go.
Thank you, Ulrich. Good morning to you all. I hope you are enjoying your stay in Addis, those of you who are coming from long distances. I think I will be presenting after the IT professional, so I hope you will not get bored with my presentation. And I thank you also again, Ulrich, for energizing the audience. My presentation will be focusing on the benefits of track and trace, and I will go through the whole national health sector about FMHACA, but of course, before going through all the health sector, we have to talk a little bit about the Ethiopian context and why we should implement track and trace, what are the social situations prevailing in Ethiopia, and also because my title also covers Africa and the global situation as well. And last but not least, what would be the rationale in implementing track and trace with regards to patient safety? And finally, what we are envisioning to implement track and trace, of course, being the foundation, being the GS1 standards. So a little bit about Ethiopia. I will not go through the geographical location, but Ethiopia is a rapid economic, in a country with a rapid economic growth, with 11% average growth over the past 13 years. And one of the top destinations for foreign direct investment. As you know, we are the second most populous country in Africa, next to Nigeria. And we are now becoming more than 100 million. And we are envisioning to become a leading manufacturing in Africa. We have a session in the afternoon also for manufacturers. And this is also, I will show you some of the pharmaceutical sales in Africa and what is the market size, with how much percentage is it growing annually, and also the African as well as the Ethiopian situation. So with regards to the health sector as well, as you know, we have been successful in implementing most of the Millennium Development Goals for the last 20 years. And now we are on the health sector transformation plan. So our literacy rate also is increasing. So with increasing literacy rate, there is also increase in life expectancy, and there are also a lot of health facilities coming up. So Ethiopia is building a mega infrastructure projects, as you well know, to boost investment, which will capitalize the existing geographical and market access advantages. So we have the Renaissance Dam, as you know, which generates more than 600 kilowatt of electric power. And we have the railway that is being constructed, which is also one of the, which will be one of the biggest transportation systems which crosses from one country to the other. And we have the well-known Ethiopian Airlines, which connects Africa to the other continents, to the other countries. So this will also be a foundation for the economic growth that we are envisioning to become middle-income economy by the year. Also, and one of the industrial parks is solely dedicated to pharmaceutical production, which is not very far from Addis, around 13 to 20 kilometers from Addis. So this is not only for pharmaceuticals, there are also other industrial zones which are also for agro-processing and other kinds of industries. So all this contribute to the growth that we are envisioning as a country. So when we talk about pharmaceutical manufacturing, there is, as you know, there is a plan for pharmaceutical manufacturing in Africa. And in alignment to that, Ethiopia has already a 10-year strategy for pharmaceutical manufacturing. And this is also in alignment with our growth and transformation plan of Ethiopia. And by the year 2025, we are envisioning to cover 60% of the demand for essential medicines by local manufacturing. So there is a huge promotion for local manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, especially for essential medicines. So you can correlate on how the pharmaceutical market will rise in Ethiopia and how we should secure our supply chain, because now we are dependent solely on importation, because at the current stage, not more than 15% of the local demand is covered by local manufacturing. But within these 10 years, we are envisioning to have a lot of manufacturing, and we have to also track and trace the products that are manufactured. And these industries are not only to cover the local only, but they have to export to other countries, to other African countries. The incentive government is planning is based on export and value addition. So for export, they have to penetrate to other markets, and for that, especially track and trace system will enable these local manufacturers to export to other countries. So just to highlight on how our health system is organized, so we are the regulator, one of the pillars in the health sector, and there is purchaser and provider. So these three pillars will constitute the whole health sector. And you can see our health sector is organized in three-tier system, and there are a lot of health facilities coming up. If you see the primary level, there are health post, health center, and primary hospitals, general hospital at the second level, and tertiary hospitals at the third level. So all these require health commodities. As you know, with the WHO Global Health System Framework, health commodities are very, very essential. So all these facilities need health commodities at the right time, at the right place, and with the right quality. 9 of them are involved in producing human medicines, and this will cover 15 to 20% of the local demand. So we have private importers and wholesalers as well, and currently we have 313 hospitals, but by the end of 2020, we are envisioning to have 800 hospitals, including primary, general and specialized hospitals. And we are also producing a lot of health professionals. This will contribute to the market size for pharmaceuticals as well. We are producing a lot of lower level, middle level, and higher level health professionals. So if we see, this is just to show you the history of regulation, health regulation in Ethiopia. So we came out to be a huge authority which regulates all health-related issues before 2009. We were only controlling medicines. And before that, it was a simple department in the Ministry of Health. Now we have become to be a big authority which regulates all health-related issues under one authority. Maybe in the near future, we will be becoming FDA. I don't think globally there is this kind of regulatory system. So our mission and vision is to promote quality and safety of medicines, food, professional competency and ethics of health professionals, and quality service of health facilities. By the way, this photo is when we had a national consultative workshop on GS1 in mid-July 2016. I hope you can track my photo me in this photo. Not actually, you cannot trace, but you can track where I am in this photo. So this is just next to the Dubai conference when my Director General and other colleagues from PFSA and from FMACA went and took the recommendations from the GS1 conference, and we had a consultative workshop here, not in Sheraton, but in Hilton Hotel, in the presence of His Excellency, the former Health Minister of Ethiopia. Then this was just to create awareness, and if we have this kind of platforms where we can implement GS1 standard, and also to create an awareness between the stakeholders responsible for track and trace. So our mission is to ensure quality health service and products to all citizens. So we have the strategy, the policy framework to ensure quality safety products, especially medicines. And in this health sector transformation plan, we have 4 transformation agendas. one of the opportunities to implement track and trace in Ethiopia is the transformation agenda, which is information revolution. So information revolution is dependent on, it clearly says that we have to transform that from the traditional use of data management system, especially the health data management system, to the modern management system whereby you can share the data that you capture globally, not only nationally, but also globally. So you get a true data where you can really get reliable information, and based on that you can make decision making. And in alignment to that, we have also a health regulatory transformation plan, which is now in the midterm. Both the health sector transformation plan and the regulatory transformation plan are in the midterm, and we are planning to do midterm evaluation here. In alignment to that, we have also indicated that we will revolutionize our information system. So this will be in alignment to, this will be a good opportunity to implement track and trace. So we have the proclamation, the regulation. Our proclamation is on the process of revision. In this proclamation, we don't have any article that states that products should be uniquely identified. But in the current revised proclamation, which is not yet approved, we have put products will be uniquely identified. So one of the revisions for the current draft proclamation is we have put an article. So this was also a recommendation from JS1, because we cannot implement track and trace if we don't have the proper legal framework. So with that recommendation, we have included an article. So what we regulate the 4 P's. That is the premises, practice, professional, and products. I will not go in detail to that. This is because this is the common regulatory functions globally. And just to show you what we do currently and what we are doing. And we do registration of products. You might have seen on the entrance to this hall how we have automated our registration system. We do post-market surveillance, we do testing, licensing, inspection, and all the regulatory functions. But still, I will show you cases whereby we have encountered substandard, falsified, not registered medicines. But we do most of the regulatory functions. And we have been giving licenses, registrations, and all those regulatory functions. And we want to focus from pre-regulation to post-regulation. So we have regulatory infrastructures where we do our regulatory functions. One of it is the medicine registration information system. This is a web-based online registration system whereby wherever you are, you can apply for registration of your products to get market authorization in the Ethiopian market. So this is also one of the information revolutionization process whereby you can access what are the products, what are the medical, pharmaceutical products, not medical devices, but medicines that are registered and approved to be in the Ethiopian market. And this can also be utilized to know what kinds of products are in the market, and regulators can know which are the products which are not registered. So this is an online system, and we have an ISO certified medicine quality control lab. It's not only the medicine quality control lab, but the condom testing laboratory also is an ISO 17025 certified laboratory starting from 2011. So what are our unique or new strategic initiatives? We want to strengthen post-licensing regulatory functions, and we want to implement technology that will assist the public in distinguishing the legal from illicit medicines. That is the query or the question that the demand that we are getting from the public. How can we distinguish when we go to the pharmacies, when we go to the retail outlets, what are the methods or the technologies that we can distinguish between legal and illicit medicines? So you always talk about illicit medicines being in the market, but how can I distinguish? And strengthen community participation and also technology-assisted regulation, and overall to improve community satisfaction. So to talk about the complexity of the supply chain. This is just a comparison of the supply chain in the developing countries and the supply chain in the developed countries. So my figure is just taken from several research documents, so this might not be always true, but you can see that there are a lot of actors in the supply chain of developing countries. There are private sector, public sector, NGOs, and there are a lot of chains in the middle between the manufacturers, the suppliers, and the end user. So this is how regulation will be very tricky and complex. So there are a lot of hands that the products will reach until it gets to the patient. So this is how complex it would be for regulators who are in low and middle income countries. So to see what will happen in the next 10 to 15 years with regards to the pharmaceutical market. So globally, just to show the African context, investors are attracted to invest in Africa not because of the market size, but the growth of the pharmaceutical market that goes annually. So annually, the African pharmaceutical market is increasing by 9 to 10%. So there is a huge opportunity for investment, and this is mainly due to the economic growth, the health facilities that are being established, and the life expectancy being increased, and all those factors are increasing the African pharmaceutical market. And this is also envisioned to be 9 to 10% per annum. So there will be a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturers, pharmaceutical supply chain management, and all those things will be increasing. So when we come to the Ethiopian context, like my colleague from KEMSA was presenting, we have a pharmaceutical fund and supply agency, which is the biggest procurement agency, government agency, which procures medicines to government facilities. It distributes more than $850 million worth of health commodities annually, which goes to roughly to 20,000 health facilities. So by 2020, it is expected to reach about $1 billion US. So you can imagine the increasing rate of the pharmaceutical market. So when we mean complex, what do we mean by complexity of the pharmaceutical supply chain? So because a lot of hands will change in the distribution in the supply chain, there is always risk of falsification, diversion, and going out from the formal market. And the unique property of medicines being for sick people, and the unique property of patients not checking the quality on spot, because there is no means to check the quality of medicine. So it's all based on trust. Patients trusting the pharmacists, patients trusting the health facilities, patients trusting the retail outlets. There is no way that they can distinguish quality products from low quality products. So the unique thing makes pharmaceutical supply chain very complex. And the other issue is about the information asymmetry, or people cannot check or ensure the quality of the products. So there will be low quality falsified medicines because of the low awareness and the low knowledge of quality of medicines. So market controls are very essential, and you can imagine with this complexity of the supply chain, it will be a nightmare for regulatory authorities like us to control the market. So we expect from the pharmaceutical supply chain to deliver the right product to the right place at the right time. So this is the expectation that we expect from the pharmaceutical supply chain. So there are a lot of ways medicines can be counterfeited, falsified, and adulterated. It's not only after they go into the supply chain, it also happens with the raw materials that they use. because there are a lot of actors here. We get raw materials from different parts of the globe, and they come into the supply chain, and they will be adulterated, and then there will be also a risk of diversion and falsification in the supply chain. So it's not only track and trace that will improve this, but as an added value with the other regulatory functions, this could be an area of improvement and implementation. So there is also a study done in 2010 by interviewing on or asking the industry executives, and they were asked, what are the risks that you fear? What are the threats to the supply chain? And they answered that most of the replies were challenging their supply chain, which will be challenged by counterfeit and falsified products. And that is one of the huge reply that they have given to the researchers. So this is not only the worry of the regulators, but also the worry of the people who are involved in supplying products. So I will not go through this, what is the occurrence of substandard and falsified medicines, because yesterday Mike from WHO has already gone through that. But I will quote His Excellency WHO DG Dr. Theodros' statement. Substandard and falsified medicines particularly affect the most vulnerable communities. Imagine a mother who gives up food or other basic need to pay her child's treatment, which causes her child to die. So this is unacceptable. So we cannot accept a mother paying for her child's treatment and getting false commodities, and again, the treatment fails. So we cannot accept that. So I will not go through the studies that have been done, because I also referenced the WHO study. So I will not go through the data, but we have to think that this is the problem that falsified and substandard medicines are causing is very huge. So there are many cases in Africa and globally where low quality products have caused a lot of problems. And if we survey our market, there are a lot of issues with substandard. This is a study done in Ghana, both in the formal and informal market, with regards to oxytocin and ergometrin. You know that oxytocin is a very critical product which requires cold chain. And it was really, the fatality rate was alarming. And some of the products were unregistered, and all those unregistered products failed the quality parameters. So there is no part of the globe which is unaffected. If you go to Pakistan, if you go to some parts of Africa, there are a lot of issues that are encountering with low quality products. So developed countries like the US are also affected with falsified, adulterated products, which has caused a huge threat to safety, to patient safety. And some of the products are not really manufactured in the US, but also has crossed many distances to reach to countries. So you can imagine how these products were not tracked and traced when they cross different borders. So this is just an example of a drug which is called Avastin, which is used for people who are on chemotherapy treatment. And this product has crossed from Turkey and has passed through Canada and reached to the US. And this is a falsified product which does not have the correct active ingredient. So it has passed a lot of distance, but it has reached to physicians' hands, and lastly they were notified not to use this product. But you can imagine how much distance it has crossed until it reached to the patient. So there is sometimes counterfeiting and falsification might be very tricky so that we cannot distinguish which is the true, which is the correct, which is the genuine one, and which is the false product. So there are many cases which people cannot distinguish between two products where one is counterfeit and one is genuine. And if I take you to the Ethiopian context, recently we did a market survey in different parts of Ethiopia. And our market survey was concentrating on essential medicines like artemether and lumefantrine combination, which is Quartan. So when we did the market survey, we found products these products were found not from the informal market, but from the formal market. That is, pharmacies who are legally licensed by regulatory authorities. So this is a product which is solely for Ugandan people, that is procured by the government of Uganda. And it's not for sale in Ethiopia, it's only for sale in Uganda. And there is also products which we found which are procured by government of Kenya and which are sold in Ethiopia. And this product, I don't think it would be properly visible. It is quinine sulfate, which is found in the border parts of Ethiopia, bordering between Sudan and Ethiopia, which is 100% counterfeit with no active ingredients. So this kind of products will show us that even if we do a lot of regulatory functions, still these products are prevailing in our market. And this one has Ugandan, Tanzanian, Kenyan, Zambian registration number. So it has all the 4 countries' registration number. That is, when they get their market authorization, they have a unique number that is given from the regulatory authorities. And this is not supposed to come to Ethiopia. This is not a product manufactured for Ethiopia. And this one is a registered product. We don't know, we have not given any market authorization to these products, but they are freely sold in some parts of Ethiopia in the licensed retail outlets. So we have been doing a lot of things. We have been taking samples from the market and testing products yearly, especially concentrating on the essential medicines. And gradually the failurity rate, the level of substandard, is increasing from when it was more than 20% in the year 2008, 2007. Now it has decreased to 3%. But still, there are products which are prevailing in the market, which are unregistered, substandard, maybe falsified, because our post-market surveillance is concentrated on the formal market. So still, there are issues that we should implement apart from the common regulatory functions that we are doing. So what would be the solutions? Because these products are prevailing on the market, we have to find solutions for that. So that is why we went to track and trace implementation of tracking and tracing the product. So we have to have standards and we have to implement technology. So that would be the solution that we envision, that we need to implement in order to prevent and combat falsified and substandard medicines. I have already indicated that. So what is our journey to track and trace? So the picture that I was showing you, we started with a consultative meeting, then we discussed with stakeholders, and then we developed the governance structure for track and trace. So there came to be a national steering committee, there came to be a technical working group. In the national steering committee, there are a lot of stakeholders which are being involved, including our partners as well. So we defined our clear objective. So our primary objective is to ensure patient safety. So this is our primary objective, and we developed, we set all the objectives in order to ensure patient safety. So our objective is to strengthen the pharmaceutical regulatory system, because in order to implement that, we have to create the environment for implementation. So one objective is to strengthen the regulatory system. and to build technology infrastructure to increase the capacity of our stakeholders, to increase awareness, communication, and then ultimately implement track and trace through different phases. So collaboration is a key, because yesterday also in the think tank session, it was highly raised about collaboration. In today's presentations also, there is no, the video that was shown by Rami, it clearly indicates that there is no one agency that can ensure, or that our stakeholders in the traceability committee, there are members from the Ministry of Health, from local manufacturers association, from the hospitals, from importers, distributors association, and also from the donor side. And then the foundation should be global standards. So in order to implement full traceability, we have to have standards. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we don't have to start from scratch. So in order to also support local manufacturers, if we use local traceability codes, we cannot penetrate to the other markets. So our foundation should be global standards. So with this, with the principle of identification, sharing, and capturing information and data exchange, with this principle, we have started our journey to track and trace. So before we laid out our objective, we did an assessment. The technical working group did an assessment, which maybe in the next presentations might be highlighted. In the assessment, what we found out what are the challenges, what are the strengths, threats, opportunities, and weaknesses that we have as a nationally to implement track and trace or to implement GS1 standards. So that assessment was done by workshops, face-to-face discussions, and questionnaires to importers, manufacturers, to government agencies who are responsible in the supply chain management. So that some of the challenges that are highlighted here, because when we implement GS1, we cannot remove the challenge that we will face, because there are challenges of technology, infrastructure, awareness, and because there is no implementation until now in any sector about GS1. And what are the opportunities? Like I said, the political commitment, the policies, the strategies that are being implemented in the country are one of the opportunities, and also the industry development and the economic development that we are envisioning could be opportunities to implement track and trace. So I think this slide was also presented in the think tank presentation, but for those of you who were in the other session, so this is what we have been doing until now. So our primary focus is patient safety, and we have done assessment, created a strategic plan on where we start and where we end up. And this might take several years, but we have to have a clear roadmap where we can reach in the next coming years. And a pilot study is also being conducted. I will not go through that because there is a presentation after me on the pilot study that is being done on anti-malarial products. So this was also the poster that won the poster competition in Berlin. So so why we choose malaria medication? Because as I was showing you some of the case studies, most of the falsified and substandard medicines are anti-malarial products. In the yesterday's presentation by Mike, the global surveillance data also shows that most of the falsified products are antibiotics and anti-malarials. With pilot study, and our roadmap clearly shows that why we are planning to implement track and trace by phase implementation is from each phase there is a learning process. So from the pilot study there is something that we learn. From the other phases also there is something that we learn. So we cannot implement JS1 overnight. So we have to see what kind of technology infrastructure is needed, what kind of human resource is needed, what kind of regulatory systems are needed to implement track and trace. So I will not dwell into the technology process because I'm not an IT specialist, but all the presentations that were being done before me are included in this pilot study. So there are two phases in Ethiopian's track and trace implementation. The first one is to create or strengthen the environment in which implementation is possible. And the other one is to implement track and trace for patient safety and visibility of the supply chain, or to increase the efficiency of the supply chain. So in the first phase, there are four objectives, four strategic objectives. One is to strengthen the regulatory framework. And under that, we will establish a traceability office in FMHACA. And after the revision of the proclamation, there will be regulation and all those legal frameworks that should be issued. And there should be also a clear plan how to strengthen the regulatory system in order to implement track and trace, and then build and sustain technical infrastructure, technical needs for what you call master data, and all those barcoding systems, scanning, and all those technology infrastructure will be in place. And then stakeholders' capacity, because not only FMHACA that's going to implement track and trace. So there are a lot of stakeholders that we need to create an environment for, so that they can easily implement, so that the process could be easy and flexible for them, and to increase their capacity, their awareness, their know-how about this track and trace system. And the fourth objective is to strengthen knowledge, communication, and collaboration. So we continuously create awareness, we continuously create capacity building for our for stakeholders, for different government agencies, and for FMHACA as well. So the second phase will be creating visibility in the supply chain. So we start with unique identification and labeling requirements. So manufacturers will uniquely identify their products, and they will submit the codes that can uniquely identify their products. Then this will be shared to the master data, and then we will start with batch traceability. So in batch traceability, there are a lot of advantages, including inventory management, recall management, expiry date management, and all those things. Then in phase 3, we will uniquely serialize and trace products. So this is how we plan to manage impact, because on batch traceability, there are a lot of issues that we need to overcome. There are a lot of challenges that we need to overcome. This could be a learning process when we start to implement serialization of each product. That is one-to-one traceability or end-to-end traceability. So different countries, one of the opportunities is there's a global experience. More than 40 countries are implementing JS1 standard. So because of the global experience, we have a learning opportunity. And because of this roadmap, we will have also a learning opportunity. So we have put on our proclamation, revised the proclamation from the date of issue or from the date of approval of the proclamation. We have 18 months to go to implement, to uniquely identify products. So if that is approved, then once the proclamation is issued, this will be mandatory to uniquely identify products. So yesterday in the think tank, there were a lot of questions being asked. When are you planning to start track and trace? This is mainly this is a draft, but this is our roadmap. So it goes until 2025, but it's a continuing process. It's a continuing process, but we will implement batch traceability, tracing unique items. This could be going beyond 2025. But we start from now, and we implement, or we start the process, and we are aspiring that we will start implementation by 2025. This is yet a draft which could be revised and enriched, but this is how we designed our roadmap. So in the phased implementation, not all products will be uniquely identified, but we are planning to start with a high-risk product, especially the program medicines, which are mostly prone to falsification, like the TB, malaria, vaccine, HIV, and very high-risk products, and start with these products and gradually go phase by phase to the other products. So until now, what are the lessons that we have learned during this process, starting from 2016, when I told you that there was a national consultative workshop? So we have to engage our stakeholders, supply chain partners, manufacturers, wholesalers, importers, healthcare providers, government agencies. So engagement, collaboration is a key, is a must. And we need to learn from international developments, from countries who are already on the process of implementation. So we have to learn how they have overcome their challenge and engage experts on global standards and traceability, like what we are doing now. And then as a regulatory body, we say that we have to take the lead in the implementation. So for regulatory alignment, we need to understand our challenge. We need to understand that supply chain is global and requires a global approach. It's not a national approach, but it requires a global approach. And it should be interoperable. What is operating here, it should be operated in other countries as well. So in order to avoid the complexity and the inefficiency and costs, it has to be operable in other scenarios as well. So as I have said previously, there is no reinvention of the wheel. We have to implement what is there globally. So we have to be very wise and strategic. And we have to make our industry, our pharmaceutical manufacturing industry, ready for global implementation. So like we say, implementing track and trace is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But at the end, the success that you get will satisfy, even though the journey is a marathon, it's not a sprint. But at the end of the day, the goal is patient safety. So we have to be very patient and work together to implement track and trace. So while you are here, please enjoy Ethiopian coffee, not with this traditional pot, but the modern pot that you are being served. And don't forget, I think, the evening program. So I think they will serve us with the traditional coffee. So thank you very much, partners, for the work that we are doing together. Thank you so much.
I can only say bravo to FMHK. That's my honest opinion, to see really a roadmap with realistic timelines, with the right approach, with doing pilots, with concentrating on some products first. Yes, that's the only thing I can say. I'm more than pleased, I'm happy. That's really what we have discussed so much. And thank you very much for really drafting a roadmap which is realistic in implementation. With that, I would like to invite the next speaker, Teddy. And Teddy is not only from USAID Ethiopia, he's also a very gifted teacher. He taught me the few words in local language this morning. He also taught me that I mean, if you see me this today going a little bit like this is not because I'm nervous or something like that. He said, I need to prepare for the networking event tonight. So you all need to do this to be ready for tonight. There's the big networking event tonight, and everybody is invited to this, really. Everybody is invited. There's no special invitation. Everybody is invited to, and is hosted by FMHK, USAID, and all the donors here. It will be in a local restaurant. It will be local. The buses are leaving the hotel at 7 o'clock. And for the locals, they can go directly there.
Everybody, for everyone.
we have for everybody. So please get prepared and doing this, okay? Here we go.
All right. Thank you, Ulrika. For this presentation, as you can see, I was supposed to have my partner, Al. Unfortunately, he's not in country. He's the one who's done the work, so I'm going to present on his behalf. Most of the things, I think, Heran already set the stage. What we have been trying to do here for track and trace, we have been going through a lot of journeys. So I'll just go through some of the lesson learned through the implementation of small pilots since 2015. And lastly, what we have currently trying to pilot for malaria verification. So what are some of the traceability efforts in Ethiopia? And as I said, the verification mobile app that we developed for here to be used by the end users, and what we have been planning in the future to test. So just a little bit of history. In 2050, USAID, UNFP, and our medical store PFSA, we have collaborated to come up with some pilot project to test a GS1 barcode, mainly how it can help facilitate capturing of information, not even sharing the data. Just can we reduce the time it takes to capture data using a standard barcode, and they're able to do some barcoding for us, and the result we got from this testing was very encouraging. It reduces the time to capture information significantly. We've tried it along the supply chain, starting from the border when it arrives in Ethiopia, all the way it gets to the facility, the loss level. So that was a very encouraging pilot for us. So from that, we were able to store that information in our local supply chain information system, an existing, we call it HCMIS, the Health Commodity Management Information System. So we were able to visualize how the data has been moving across the supply chain for the first time. Since then, we get to learn a little bit more about GS1, what the different combinations or different kinds of codes we have and capability it can provide. So one of the things the JSI implementing partner have done for PFSA is we used to have a dot matrix printer when we issue a voucher from a medical store. And because this voucher has to be typed in again in a computer because of the internet connectivity in a barcode. And then when the person take it from the hub down to the facility, instead of retyping that information, we can easily scan the barcode and the information can be populated, so we can reduce errors. So with that, we said, can we change the printers in Ethiopia for those medical store? So when we change that, we come up with another issue, because the documents that are being used in the dot matrix printer have a unique ID that the finance minister is providing because they are vouchers. So how do you come up with that number in a normal A4 paper that can print barcode? So we need to think of a unique identifier, which we subscribe and got the GDTI number. So we added that barcode to the normal paper, which will help us uniquely identify each of the invoice and prevent it from falsification. So that's currently implemented and successfully working now, which by itself gave us a lot of savings in terms of the cost of buying paper or maintenance of a very old dot matrix printer, and also really unique identification globally for our invoices that are generated from the medical store. So this is what it looks like. So you see two barcodes. One is the GDTI number. The other is just the content of the information within this document. So if you go to that PFSA site, and you can either type the number or scan the barcode number that uniquely identifies the invoice. And the other barcode is, if you don't have internet connection and you haven't received the information, you can just scan the other barcode and it will automatically populate the information. So this is one of the lessons we have learned, beside just tracking of medicines, even within the supply chain, using the standard, we can improve some kind of efficiencies with our systems. So we haven't stopped our learning there, which will continuously help us improve our roadmap. When we tried to implement that document, we thought we can finish it in a week, but it took us 6 months. So the realization of just changing a printer and adding a barcode into a paper is not easy. Then there is more lessons and more realistic plans when we try to do this pilot for malaria verification. So here I have shown this slide a little bit. So what we have done is, what can we test end user verification using global standard? So we have asked our question, can we develop the mobile app? Yeah, that was very easy. We have competent developers, they have developed the app. But where do we get the data? We have to look at the manufacturers that are supplying to Ethiopia, and of those manufacturers, which one are already have implemented the GS1 standard? Not only implemented, are they willing to share that data to Ethiopia? Have they already stored that data for all the products that specifically they send to Ethiopia? Do they have that information? Which serial numbers or which batch numbers are already in their database that can be shared with us? So that was a lot of lessons that we learned, because this interaction with manufacturer was not easy. So we have to solicit help from GS1 office, PSM Global and RAMI. We have got a lot of help through all these connections we have to really get, okay, we identified the manufacturer, they have implemented GS1, and they were able to share those numbers, range of numbers that are only given to Ethiopia. So once we got that number, we also had a challenge of, okay, do all the malaria products that are currently in country have that barcode? Because in our supply chain, we don't have visibility of how many products of the same manufacturer are still at the facility, still at the warehouse, or still at the hub, or in people's hand. Before we roll out this app saying, okay, from now on, you can use this mobile app and scan and tell whether that malaria product is authentic or not, or it comes from the manufacturers that it's claiming it comes from. So again, for that, we really had to do an inventory and going and around and collecting this information within our facility. So we have tested it from the highest level, from the central medical store, then going to the hubs, and going to the facilities, and testing if this mobile app, whatever product we find on the shelf, can be authenticated within the range of data that was given to us. So our test shows really good results. Even most of the products that we have scanned so far can be authenticated within the given range of numbers that we got from the manufacturers. So we are now ready to announce to the public, from using this mobile app that they can download from the App Store, they can verify the ACT medicines that are in circulation within countries. For that, we need to create an awareness for the public. We also need to add other features for our product, because most of Ethiopian community, the literacy rate is very low. Most Ethiopian community, they don't have a mobile app. So we also have to create a parallel system that they were able to enter the number, or they are able to speak the number using an IVR system. So we are slowly and gradually expanding the pilot in terms of feature, remaining with one product. And then based on the result of this test, we're going to continue to expand to other high-risk falsification medications within the supply chain. So what outcome we are expecting from this journey, or from this test or pilot, is to enable the public the authenticity of a product that uses a global standard. So we will put that power at the hands of the end users. We can start with that verification. Even if it is one product, as you can see, there is 6.5 million malaria cases in Ethiopia. So that's a big start for us. So there will be a lot of lessons that can be learned from this one. And then both Yahulu and Heran alluded, we have put a roadmap that shows some time frame. But even those time frames are flexible. We're not fixed by 2025, we're going to have the full serialization. Or we're going to start the serialized track and trace by 2025. Based on the lesson we learn, we're continually going to revise and improve our roadmap. So, in this exercise, one of the side lesson we are also learning is we have developed a national architecture for our track and trace that we hope to get to. And we have an existing information systems, as I said, for the supply chain. So by just doing verification, we are studying what kind of modification do we need to do on the given architecture. Because those architectural requirements that are needed for track and trace needs modification depending on the context that we have in our country. We will also would like to expand not only to limit ourselves with malaria and go to other programs. We would like to get other manufacturers on board. As I said, it was not an easy process, but we need to continue to get other suppliers on board for us to share their serialized GTIN if they have, otherwise at least batch level integration. The other part I said is, I've already mentioned, is to add more different various technologies to enable the communities like IVRs systems so that they can easily authenticate the product using their existing platforms. Finally, we have worked on the master facility technology in Ethiopia. We have a master facility list for our health facilities, but the way the master facility list application is developed is not compliant to the standards. So we are having issues of using that master facility. So we are trying to look at how we can improve the master facility list using the global standard again, so that it can be applicable within the context of the architecture we have developed for the track and trace system in Ethiopia context. So in the end, product identification and data exchange provides the basis for implementation of traceability system that will help us visibility in the supply chain so that we know exactly how many products we have in the supply chain and where. The system standardization using the standards will help us improve recall, detect counterfeit products in the supply chain, and the right medication at the right time. I know we are still in the early stage of implementation, but we believe our experience is beneficial to other countries. So we'll be happy to share the documentation of the journey we went through in developing this app and the lesson we learned in getting this pilot rolled out. So with that, I'll finish, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Teddy. And we managed to be back on time. I don't know how we did that, but it's really great. So thank you very much to all the speakers of the morning for sharing their really inspiring lessons learned and the ways they have moved forward. I invite you now to the coffee break and ask you to be back 11:45. So you have 45 minutes to chat and talk to these people who presented. Thank you.
and to build technology infrastructure to increase the capacity of our stakeholders, to increase awareness, communication, and then ultimately implement track and trace through different phases. So collaboration is a key, because yesterday also in the think tank session, it was highly raised about collaboration. In today's presentations also, there is no, the video that was shown by Rami. So before we laid out our objective, we did an assessment. The technical working group did an assessment, which
there would be kilos, which I would have to bring now. But if you know me, I always fulfill my promises. So my team has brought really the Belgium chocolates, and I hope all of you are enjoying them. I also got a lot of questions on the presentations. The presentations and the photos from yesterday are already on the website. We're allowed to share, and the photos are already up. And the same will be true for today. They are available for everybody, just to be very clear on that. So with that, I'm very glad to open the next part of our morning plenary. And we have heard the acronym LMIS so often this morning already and yesterday. So I'm really very happy that we have with Josh Samor, somebody who is really working on the architecture of Open LMIS and will talk to us about that. Josh, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Just squeezing it into the morning here so I can still say good morning. So thank you. It's an honor to be here, and my name is Josh Zamor. I work for Village Reach, and and I'm a software architect for the open source software Open LMIS. So I want to start us off by going over what LMIS is, and also then hopefully relate back to what I've learned over the past 5 years implementing, or actually designing Open LMIS, and what that's taught me about global standards and global health IT systems. So let's see. Not sure that this is, oh, there it goes. Okay. All right, so as I was just saying, our goal for today, first, I hope that you leave this knowing a little bit more about Open LMIS, and then we're also going to look at where Open LMIS fits, and then we're going to get into the interoperability standards that Open LMIS has. So today, the OpenLMIS initiative, it has many members, but in 2008, it all started when PATH co-led a collaborative process to define requirements and develop a global standard for logistics systems. A decade later, OpenLMIS is now this diverse community of 20+ partners bringing expertise from technology to data analytics to quality software development to on-the-ground implementers and an engaged network of donors. And the impact has been pretty astounding. So OpenLMIS software is now used in multiple countries, each with a local partner who has implemented a specific version. If you have heard of VIMS in Tanzania, ELMIS in Zambia, SELV in Mozambique, or eSigil in Cote d'Ivoire, you have heard of some of the country implementations of OpenLMIS. These systems are used for many different types of health supply chain programs and manage logistics processes for over 10,000 health facilities across Africa, with more on the way. It's a little bit tricky to see some of the color coding, but just so you know, the blue is existing implementations, and right now the orange is prospective implementations. All right. So our philosophy is really what sets us apart. OpenLMIS is open source software that uses a shared investment and shared benefit model. This means whether you're a global donor or a country implementation, if you implement a new feature, then we hope to leverage that new feature across all of our implementations using our reusable microservice architecture. So we strive for interoperability using standards because we know each country has specific needs and will leverage more than one system. We believe interoperability between all those systems is the best way to achieve visibility and to meet the needs of the whole health ecosystem. And we drive to provide a highly configurable system and an extensible code base. Any country implementation can extend and change features to address the in-country context, and OpenLMIS aims to meet countries where they are at in their supply chain maturity and grow with them as they professionalize and standardize. Our community of developers delivering this software are rooted in a collaborative and supportive culture of excellence and transparency. So let's look at some of the new features, or all of the features in version 3 at this point. Some of these are new, and some are old. So OpenLMIS comes with a set of critical features that support a country in reducing stockouts, managing their cold chain, and providing end-to-end supply chain data visibility from the national store down to the health facility. And some of these features are, so facilities and storage sites at any level in that supply chain can request stock based off of mins, maxes, and forecasted demand targets. A store can also conduct a resupply, otherwise known as an order fulfillment, and send stock to facilities with an electronic proof of delivery. Integration with mobile applications allow a healthcare worker at a point of service to enter one point of information and to tie together the supply side information with the dispensing information. You can also manage your stock, your physical stock transactions by recording all of your physical inventories, your stock movements, basically the ins and the outs of your storeroom. We also have a robust new reporting and analytics infrastructure supporting key reports and global KPIs, such as Gavi's indicators for EPI, PEPFAR indicators for ARVs, and it can be customized to support the KPIs that you need in your country. And finally, you can manage your cold chain catalog, your inventory, and receive real-time alerts from remote temperature monitoring devices. So, configurability is also a key tenet of the OpenLMIS vision. Because we want to meet countries where they're at in their supply chain maturity, configurability means that an implementer can configure the system easily through the user interface without extensive code modifications. The takeaway from this slide is that whether you're trying to manage a single or a couple facilities, or more likely hundreds to thousands of facilities, OpenLMIS can be configured to do it. And that includes for global standards. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a sense of what OpenLMIS is. And now we're going to move into where OpenLMIS tends to be used, the context. So usually what we see when a ministry adopts OpenLMIS, or in fact any LMIS solution, is that they also have investments in ERP systems for their larger warehouses, in EMRs for their clinical systems, as well as mobile data collection for the truly last mile, and HMIS systems to get a sense of the big picture health outcomes. This context is pretty well recognized, and there are communities of practice, such as OpenHIE, that help define and champion interoperability standards for use in these systems. Some of these systems clearly fall in the health camp, and some clearly fall in the supply chain camp. Of course, our problems are never really that well organized, and so most of these systems have a little bit, in both areas. Take for an example a clinical system. It clearly has a health orientation. It has patients, after all, has clinical encounters. It also has a supply chain orientation. If it has a little bit of stock that is being used for treating their patients, then that would tie into the supply chain systems. And additionally, we often see that sometimes those clinical systems are also used to resupply community health workers or nearby clinics. So there's a lot of overlap. Let's see here. So looking at this jumble of information systems, it's clear that we need to adopt global standards so that all of these systems may work together and may work for our health workers rather than the other way around. Of course, what we often find is that as we tackle our own national scale information systems, we soon find that the problem is more complex. We have legitimate parallel information systems that are improving health outcomes and delivering medical supplies. They're often run by INGOs, charities, 3PLs, and of course, the private sector. And this becomes especially true as these initiatives are often aligned at improving access at the same clinics and with the same health workers. In OpenLMIS implementations of scale, we run into this frequently. We are, after all, an information system that needs to understand the big picture, logistics at the last mile, so that data for use may result in better supply chain decisions and better health outcomes. When we choose national scale information systems, or in fact, any information system, we should be keeping this in mind. We should be aiming to support many different information systems using a set of common, focused global standards. After all, at the end of the day, we may want to switch out one of these information systems or add a new information system. And because of that, that doesn't mean that our list of health facilities, our health workers, or in fact, our medical commodities are going to be changing. So the main lesson I've learned over the past 5 years is that interoperability is a necessity, and interoperability without using global standards is often, frankly, unfortunately, a waste of time. So often our implementations faced very real and costly so-called synchronization problems. Because interoperability was considered an afterthought, or the interoperability was done using a bespoke standard between just two systems. When we don't use global standards, we don't necessarily leverage the lessons that the global standards have learned and provide to us, and we see a lot of reinventing of the wheel in this space. And a lot of times that's in the effort of just getting it done, and that makes a lot of sense at the time, but we'll pay for it later on down the road, and we've seen that. So OpenLMIS version 3, the latest major release, has therefore learned heavily from our previous versions. We've thrust global standards into the heart of everything we build, and it starts at the basics. I'm going to take a slight detour and talk about some IT standards, but trust me, we'll get back to the supply chain standards shortly. So like every web-based IT system, OpenLMIS leverages numerous web standards that make the web what it is today in its ubiquity. These global web standards allow all of these IT systems to stand on the shoulders of giants and mean that whether we go to a website with our computer, with our phone, through any of the different vendor web browsers, the web all works the same. This universality wasn't always the case for those that remember the web browser wars. Of course, we're not here to really talk about web standards and all that they give us. However, as an IT professional, I think it's a powerful reminder why we should be focused on adopting global standards throughout our systems. The success of the web shows us what is possible when we do, and frankly, this ubiquity of these web standards powers most of our digital health solutions. And you can see that in the last mile where health workers are using smartphones and connecting to information systems. So let's move into the health IT domain. Our next most basic building block is to recognize that every system needs to agree on locations. In supply chain systems, these locations usually are physical locations that hold stock. In health IT systems, these are locations where patients are seen, where the clinical encounter occurs. We're in the process of implementing the IHE MCSD profile, which utilizes HL7's FHIR standard. We get a double benefit here in that HL7 FHIR has quickly and rapidly become a standard in health systems and indeed for health facility registries. It allows us to communicate both physical hierarchies as well as administrative hierarchies, which are so important in setting up our health IT systems and maintaining them. While a FHIR location does help address the unique identifier problem, it's not a standard that we would encode into a barcode, put on a physical package, and read with a capture device. That, of course, is where GS1's GLN comes in, is a perfect fit. And we can map between the health standards, such as HL7 FHIR, and the supply chain standards, such as GS1's GLN, by encoding GLNs into FHIR locations. So OpenLMIS version 3.3, which was just released, provides an example of some of this interoperability. Using some of the core components of these standards, we've shown how we can interoperate with NextLeaf's Cold Trace, which is a provider of remote temperature monitoring devices and analytics. And we've done this before, but what makes this implementation different is that we've used these global standards. And now that we've done this, we'll be able to reuse this approach with any other remote temperature monitoring device that supports these standards. And indeed, NextLeaf's Cold Trace will be able to reuse this to work with other LMIS solutions or any other IT system that supports this standard, such as an ERP or asset management system. We also shouldn't forget that people use our IT systems. And when we have IT systems that are good at specific tasks, but our people wear multiple hats. For example, a health worker using an LMIS system one day and an ERP system the next. We have really good open standards for this, such as IETF's OAuth 2. Most of us likely have used the system relying on the standard when they've logged into multiple systems without having to create a new user account and new password. OpenLMS version 3 has structured itself around this concept with the idea that as our health workers use all of these very task-oriented specific systems, that they won't have to create new user identities and profiles in each of these systems. Of course, what we're all here for is medical products, commodities and trade items, right? So let's get on to the good stuff. In previous versions of OpenLMIS, we did what most first cuts of software systems did, and we implemented the G10 field in our database. And that's the problem solved, right? Well, not so much. Not only was the field not used very often, but we found that the product list that was created in OpenLMIS was entered manually and existed only within OpenLMIS. And in fact, the same thing was done in the ERP system and the HMIS system and the clinical system. Each system, each having their own tools to create and maintain their own product lists. With hindsight, we now all know that's a faulty approach, and it leads to inevitable synchronization problems. And that, throughout the health system, hampers our ability to perform track and trace really at the most basic level. So in version 3, we have the GTIN fields, of course. We also have a whole concept called trade items that's modeled after the GS1 concept and is a first-class resource. And we combine it with commodity type concepts that allow us to talk about classification systems such as UN, SP, SC, which powers our assisted reordering features. The next step for us is to have all of this information sourced directly from the GDSN instead of entered manually. This first-class support for GS1 identifiers in OpenLMIS version 3 means that we've put unique identification using global standards at the core of every implementation that adopts version 3. And we think that a good next step in service of enterprise architecture is to split out the version 3 commodity model into a standalone microservice that can be used within any implementation's enterprise architecture as a product registry. This would help serve the many different IT systems that our implementations are already investing in heavily. ERP systems, clinical systems, LMIS, HMIS, etc. Of course, our interoperability story is far from over, and our community will help drive where we go next. Serialization, SSCC, EDI documents for ASN, receive advice, purchase orders, etc. They're all on our roadmap and open for the open source community to help prioritize. As our global community continues to adopt global standards and even invest in solutions such as OpenLMIS, we should be remembering the basics of what our information systems need to agree on using standards: locations, people, and medical products. After all, no one information system should or can do it all. To achieve track and trace, we need to adopt and use the global standards. I think we all recognize that. And we need to be sure that the IT systems that we're putting into our enterprise architecture support each of these standards effectively. An IT ecosystem that works together will be working for our health and supply chain professionals, and not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's so important that the systems really can support global standards, and that you have built that in now is fantastic. I also wanted to mention, I'm really grateful that you brought up the topics of HL7, IHE, etc. GS1 is working closely with those organizations. We don't see each other as competitions. We are working together. We are part of the JIC, the Joint Initiative Council, with ISO, with HL7, with SNOMED, with IHE, and that is an important activity that we are really all interoperable, because that will facilitate implementation. Thank you so very much for the work, and let's keep going. With that, I invite the next speaker to the stage, and it's a big pleasure to have you here, Brian, because Brian was one of the first people really putting GS1 standards in action in Africa, in Tanzania, where he led a vaccines pilot. Brian.
Thank you very much, Ulrike. So, honorable ministers and distinguished guests, all protocols observed. I'm humbled to participate here today at this African GS1 Healthcare Conference. And to accelerate the good work that FM Haka has been doing in Ethiopia and all of you across the continent. I love the picture that the Honorable Hiran Gerba displayed, that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and Ethiopia knows well how to produce marathon runners. I'm going to discuss the evolution of vaccine traceability in Tanzania. And can I ask those who are here from Tanzania to raise your hands? Oh, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. This story is not mine. This story is yours. It's a story of how Africa is already doing things that is going to take the US and the European Union another decade to catch up. It's a story of the leadership of Dr. DeFrosa, the head of the immunization program in Tanzania, that continues to champion automated identification and data capture. It's a story of the expansion of, it's the heroes here in this room, actually, of Teddy Barron, now with USAID in Ethiopia, and Marasi Mwencha, who led the ELMIS expansion in Tanzania, and is now working here in Ethiopia as well. It's a story of East African software developers, Kelvin, Sunday, and Nicholas, that built and helped implement the initial pilot software in 2014, and later migrated this barcode functionality to the open source software that was just mentioned in products in Tanzania, and then other products in Nicaragua and the Gambia. So while you've heard policy and regulatory updates that are harmonizing manufacturing processes in the United States, the European Union, and also in South Korea and elsewhere, I feel that the countries in Africa are already ahead of the US and Europe in many ways. Today, I'd like to provide you an update on the barcode work begun in Tanzania in 2012. That's been a catalyst to rapidly identify, capture, and share vaccine availability from national warehouses down to the clinics where immunizations are given. So, Ethiopia and countries represented by those of you in the room know the value of barcodes. You've spoken of the reductions of the counterfeits and increasing the integrity of the overall supply chain from manufacture to distribution. The value does not stop there. Across the health system, GS1 barcodes enable us to reduce excess inventory. In a pilot in India, Logistimo was able to reduce inventory by almost 25% with zero stockouts. At scale, they predict the ability to reduce stock by 17% and a savings of $73 million annually. And then the time to manage that inventory. I'll talk more about the time savings in Tanzania in a bit. And then, of course, preventing health commodities from expiring on the shelves. I work for an organization called PATH, and where we envision a world where innovation ensures that health is within reach for everyone. And barcodes are such an innovation. In the coming years, we need your leadership. We need your leadership to build the demand that changes the product packaging at the point of manufacture. We need your continued progress to deploy software across the health system, to capture data when it is scanned. And we need the same buying power to bring down the cost of the hardware that is appropriate for working across the countries in the challenging environments. So of those of you in the room, how many have been in a walk-in cold room where vaccines are stored? Okay, there's a good number of you. So the picture that I have on the right here is a reading in one of those in the district vaccine stores. So the lighting in this ballroom is pretty good, correct? Okay. What if I told you that it's 5 times brighter than that walk-in cold room? And it's 5 times dimmer in this ballroom than the specifications recommended for scanning barcodes in Canada. So imagine working in a storeroom with this level of lighting, and it being cold, without power for hours at a time, and still needing to distribute the stock. So while I have this a phenomenal app on my phone to scan the GS1 barcodes, it fails in these low lighting conditions. And it can't handle the sand and rain that I expose it to. So Chuck Bliss, back there, thank you very much for helping us over the years to start to develop a target product profile for scanners and find the right ones that can work for these long hours and low lighting conditions. So I don't know if Tanzania was just at the right place at the right time, but shortly after the creation of the Vaccine Packaging Presentation Advisor Group, VPAG, the CEOs of Gavi and PATH, Seth Berkley and Steve Davis, set a goal to reduce vaccine wastage by 10 billion doses by 2024. And then Gavi held a global conference in Dar es Salaam, where Daniel Thornton of Gavi and Dr. DeFosas Liamo, who I mentioned earlier, set a bold direction for Tanzania to increasing vaccine visibility within 5 years. Since that time, Tanzania has been working on multiple fronts to improve data collection and use. And in the summer of 2014, PATH successfully tested the use of barcodes from the arrival in the country all the way down to the distribution to facilities as part of this barcode subgroup mentioned above. 7 manufacturers shipped vaccines to Tanzania as part of that GS1 pilot. So now, barcode functionality has been added to that National Logistics Management Information System. And with some basket funding using the remaining funds from Gavi after the pilot, as well as fundraisers from the GS1 staff, we were able to acquire scanners for the rest of the Arusha region in northern Tanzania, serving about 2 million people in the population. And even though we only have 2 of the 5 current manufacturers of vaccines in Tanzania, the approximately 750 boxes in each district storeroom, 85% of those have barcodes on them. And this, in combination with the ELMIS scanners and barcodes, we're now capturing real-time packaging data with lots and expiry dates with over 100,000 scans. But before Dr. DeFrosa was willing to implement barcodes at scale, she, along with many of you in the room, wanted to learn more about the benefits and those associated costs. So as such, we did a study that paired regions and district vaccine stores that were still on the paper system, some with only the electronic logistics management information system, and those that had the additional barcode scanners. In addition, we did a limited longitudinal study it lasted about 6 months to look at the data quality and use over that time. The paper process of writing down the lot and expiry date on the distribution forms, and then noting the changes in the ledgers are shown in this photograph. So, and even though the Arusha region was only scanning 2 of their vaccines, the time savings from the monthly inventory process was quite remarkable. Initially, the inventory process spanned more than a day. With the addition of barcodes, the inventory was done in an hour and a half, collapsing 10 steps into 5. Furthermore, the barcode scanners and system implemented a little haptic feedback that basically was decision support. So if the vaccine had expired, it sort of shook in your hand. Or if the vaccine needed to be used in that next month, the ELMIS would throw up an alert. And while not as dramatic, the quarterly resupply process had a similar time savings from over half a day to an hour and a half. One additional feature of the system was that similar buzzing feedback, and you were not allowed to distribute a vaccine that had expired or whose lot number had not been authorized for release. So here's the money slide. Adding together the improvements in stock management, ordering, receiving, and issuing vaccines, each district saved about 200 hours or about 10% of a person's time per year. Imagine what you could be doing with that. In addition to the labor benefits, the scanning of barcodes had additional data quality improvements, including overall improvement of the timeliness. It was often taking between 3 and 7 days for the staff to key shipping invoices into the system, whereas the use of the scanning barcodes was real time. Validating that the lot was approved for distribution was another benefit. And then it also enforced the first expired, first out rules to reduce waste of expired vaccines. And then finally, it reduced the typing and handwriting errors from manually entering that lot information. And we were seeing inaccuracy rates of up to 25% in the paper system, where there was a missing or wrong batch number, the serial number wasn't entered, there was a quantity mismatch, a wrong expiry date, or it wasn't even recorded once it was received. And then finally, there was also a great reduction in stockouts and unnecessary emergency orders as part of that overall pilot. Oh, I didn't show you the money slide. So sorry. I'm reading it on mine. I'm seeing everything here. I'll pause for a second so you can catch up. Right, good? Good. All right, fabulous. Yeah, there's actually dollars on there. But we still got more work to do. Tanzania is currently scaling their electronic logistics management information system, and there are promising signals of what has been discussed over this past day and a half. You've heard about the vaccine capabilities of GS1 support and Open LMIS, and in addition, I want to talk about a few other things that are going on. So in the Gambia, I mentioned those software developers in Tanzania that were involved in that pilot study. They've now implemented end-to-end traceability in Nicaragua. They've taken that same system to the Gambia in the past year with the help of Pfizer, one of the manufacturers with GS1 barcodes all the way to the vial level. And now Gavi is helping the country to scale the system nationally this year. So in a matter of 1 year, they've gone from pilot to scale. In August and September, Serum Institute in India will also be labeling all of their bark secondary packaging for the Gambia, giving them over 95% coverage at the district level. And one of the wonderful things about GS1 standard is that it isn't only for vaccines. This same system of track and trace can be used for all health commodities. As USAID, the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, the Global Fund, and others use their influence with manufacturers to incorporate barcodes on secondary packaging within the next 2 years, we will all benefit. So let me emphasize that point. In 2 years, both manufacturers and software systems will be available for you to scale. It's shorter than a marathon. Software systems like that shown by Teddy earlier this morning and others that were co-developed in African countries represented in this room. And as Chris Wright mentioned, Gavi is showing a renewed interest in eliminating barcodes barriers for better identification, capture, and sharing. Thank you, Chris. So please do leverage the support of Gavi and Global Fund and USAID and others to get ready. The studies in India and Tanzania have shown that the winning combination of electronic logistics systems and barcodes pays for themselves. And there's more. So you saw a little blurb on the Open LMIS about tracking cold chain equipment. The cold chain equipment manufacturers are also partnering with the WHO, UNICEF, and others to affix a permanent GS1 asset tag on the front of every new cold chain equipment that's being produced. Because they see the similar benefits knowing when a refrigerator has been put into service, how long it's still in warranty, and even what spare parts it's consuming upon repair. And if a refrigerator fails or the vaccine vial monitor indicates heat damage to a vaccine, that future serialization that we've all been talking about can prevent the future use, continuing to improve the safety of vaccine delivery. So, I stand before you today as a humble storyteller. The heroes that made this happen are the nurses that are now using improved visibility to vaccine data to ensure that they have enough polio vaccine for the outreach session. The heroes are the district officers that continually improve on time and in full delivery, ensure that there's a vaccine for every child. The heroes are you here in this room that are making this happen. It took 40 years for barcodes to be commonplace in the retail space. You will do this in 10. So please, give yourselves a round of applause. You will make this so. Thank you. Asante. Amasaganao.
Thank you so very much, Brian. And you are a hero also because you made that happen, really, in Tanzania. It needs always a visionary and somebody who believes in things that they can happen. And you did that at a time where there was not this general support which we experience these days. So thank you very much, really, for making things in Tanzania moving forward, because it's at the end, it's really for the patients and supporting the nurses and everybody. Thank you so very much. And with that, I introduce the last speaker of the morning session, which is Clinton D'Souza, who is working with Imperial Health Sciences, also a very great implementation partner with a lot of experiences. Clinton, we're looking forward to hear your view on how serialization will change our supply chain.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And so I think I've never ever attended a meeting or a conference where the 8th person is speaking before lunch. So that is just prolific organizing by GS1. Well done. And I'm equally as grateful to be here as everyone else. So thank you for the opportunity for us to share with you what we're doing as Imperial. Oh, pointed this way. Thank you. Wrong way. There we go. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Imperial Logistics, and honestly, there's going to be a fair amount of repetition, which is good news, because that means I can speed up, which means we can get to lunch a bit earlier, so that'll be good. I think the most delighted person in the room must be Mick Dietz, because I think every second person has referenced your November study, including us, and so it's incredibly valuable information. And so, you know, what is our sort of common purpose as Imperial Logistics for wanting to be involved in this? And again, it's been mentioned by just about every single speaker, and that's the issue of patient safety. From an Imperial Logistics perspective, on an annual basis, we handle about 400 million patient packs of medicines, 90% of which is distributed throughout Africa. And the only thing that I want to sort of maybe add to this, which is just to say that from our point of view, success is going to be determined by size and scale of implementation. So the faster we can get going and the faster we can get real volume moving through the system using the GS1 standards, the better these systems will become faster. So the call to action really is looking at specifically HIV/AIDS, USAID, the Global Fund, and the South African Department of Health from an ARV perspective, you know, being the biggest buyers, and this has been mentioned earlier this morning, the real influence sits with two bodies. It sits with the buyers of drugs, and it sits with the regulators of drugs. If you guys make the rules and create the environment to sort of make the manufacturers comply in a certain time, and if you put it into your tenders and say that you have to have it in place in order for us to buy from you, that's going to really help speed this all along. So just 2 slides on Imperial very quickly. This is just sort of where we are across our footprint, spans across 30 African countries and 20 European countries. And we're in multiple sectors along the left-hand side. You can't read them. The only one that really matters to this audience is that we're in healthcare, which represents approximately 12% of our overall business as Imperial Logistics. And we're in multiple parts of the supply chain. We're a logistics service provider, i.e. providing warehousing and transport services to both public and private sector clients, but we're also in the business of trading pharmaceutical products. We are wholesalers of drugs in countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Botswana, South Africa, Zambia, etc. as well. And then this is just, and again, you can't read it from wherever you are, but these 2 slides represent sort of our client base. The one on the left are all our healthcare clients, and really just about every single multinational manufacturer at some point in our organization as a client. So the multinational manufacturers, the global donors are all clients of ours, international NGOs, and in some instances, national governments as well. Okay, so getting on to, I think I can go one more, yeah. So from our perspective, when we looked at how you implement this commercially, we really looked at this from 2 perspectives. If you look at the diagram on the left-hand side, the legacy approach is really your traditional enterprise-to-enterprise EDI connection of data. So I would be a service provider, you would be a manufacturer, and we would arrange an EDI link between us, and then I would arrange a link to them, and you would end up just kind of everyone kind of linking across each other. And your real issue with this, besides everything else, if you don't, notwithstanding that it could never work if you didn't have a global standard, is synchronization. It's timing. So you're not able to look at the data at the same moment at all. There's always going to be a lag, even if it's 15 minutes, if it's half an hour. Classic example would be a monthly stock take. We would close our system at 11:30 p.m. and we would run our information. If our client closes 45 minutes later, we will not reconcile, because today's business is running all the time. So really we had to sort of rethink how we would try and do this. So from our perspective, it comes down to what we call and what is called commercially controlled towers, vans. RHSC was using the term van, and I'll talk about vans in a little bit as well. All kind of the same thing, but it's really looking at this multi-party, coordinated, shared state where we're able to find a way to look at the information as a single version of the truth, rather than relying on exchanging data at a moment in time. So this was kind of the most important part for us. The specific context from our point of view gets back to those 400 million patient packs. If you think about scanning a patient pack very conservatively 10 times through the supply chain life cycle from manufacturer to patient, it's probably much more than that, but assume 10 for easy math. That's 4 billion scans just in our instance. And we maybe represent 15% of what has moved on the continent in terms of healthcare commodities. So you could never hope to try and synchronize that amount of data through a legacy approach. You just couldn't do it. Just not possible from our point of view anyway. So Rami, this is our attempt at what you drew on your slides, which is to try and demonstrate how this end-to-end visibility might actually work and flow. And so I'm not going to go into the detail, but essentially this tries to represent how we would arrange the data sharing across the supply chain through all the different folks at the bottom here, be it manufacturers, distribution centers, wholesalers, pharmacists, patients. You would need to have at least two major enablers. One is the GS1 standards, and the others are some kind of common policy approach. Okay, so talking about vans for a moment. So this is something that was developed with the funding of Gates a couple of years ago. They came up with this concept of a visual and analytics network. And certainly from Imperial's perspective, we've been running to implement this in our own way, and many others have as well. But I guess as we look at the landscape moving forward and we start to look at trying to track at the patient pack level, this takes on a whole new meaning. When you start looking at the sheer volume of data that we're talking about. And it brings into question what sort of skills and what sort of expertise we're going to need in the supply chain moving forward. So if you look at the people, when we talked about this in the 3, 4, 5 years ago in the context of VAN, we were talking about how do we get people to understand when there are stockouts, how we can react to those stockouts faster to sort of get the supply chain enabled faster. As we look forward, we're going to need people that have got skills in things like data analytics. We're going to need people in governments that can work and develop algorithms that pick up the fact that the wrong product code from Uganda is now in the Ethiopian supply chain, and how you're actually going to be able to do something with that data. People who can share this information across stakeholders, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The processes, and everyone's talked about interoperability, everyone's talked about integrating across the supply chain, fundamental to this. And then on the technology side, certainly, from our perspective, it's got to be cloud-based, but it's this issue of common standards, synchronization, and data exchange needs to be future-proofed, if you like. So we've got to think about, yes, we're moving 400 million patient packs today, and that's going to represent X. In 5 years' time, we're going to be moving maybe double that. And so what does that look like, and how do we need to be organized in all these facets, people, processes, and technology, to meet that challenge as we move forward? And then this issue of policy, and just to sort of underline the absolutely critical role of regulators in this process in driving this common standard throughout the supply chain. So again, this is just sort of the way that we're thinking about this. So looking at all the different actors in the supply chain, the most important part of this from our point of view is that we're implementing a control tower environment across sectors. So we're doing it both in the private sector and in the public health sector, and each from a supply chain configuration perspective are wildly different. Fundamentally the same in that we're moving drugs to patients, but in terms of the makeup of that supply chain, it's fundamentally different. The common thread, though, needs to be the standard of the product throughout the supply chain. From our point of view, if the GS1 is in place, then really irrespective of what the makeup of that supply chain is, we will be able to leverage our control tower across the supply chain. Again, lots of these slides have been showing can you tell the difference between the drugs that are fake and the drugs that are real? Something that we are piloting at the moment in South Africa is an authentication project. And this is something that we've been working on for a few years. The technology that we're trialing was introduced to us by Tom Layloff, ex-MSH and FDA. And this technology is called Raman, which is a spectrum scanning technology. And it's a sort of non-intrusive, non-destructive, but it helps you, you take the gun, you point it at the product, and it gives you it records this digital image, it gives you the chemical composition of the product, and is able to accurately report back on not only molecule, but dosage form as well. And so for us, this is obviously important because you can't tell the difference by physically looking at it. And because of this proliferation of data, until you've got clever stuff in the background that can actually pick up that there's an excursion, you need to have something else in place as well, certainly on the post-market surveillance side. So this is something that we've included, and we're incorporating the digital library of all the chemical compositions that we handle in the background. And so we're going to be able to take this handheld technology and go at any point in the supply chain and scan and verify product, and it will immediately reflect against the digital data in the background and confirm that this product is in fact legitimate versus what we say it is, opposed to what it isn't. And there's another reason why we're doing this, which I'll get to right now. Right now. Aha. So when we think about our overall approach as Imperial Logistics, here are some of the strategies, the 3 core strategies of our approach. So number 1 is serialization. So getting the products serialized and then having the systems on the back end to receive the serialization data and being able to share that data across. Fundamental to rollout and synchronization is the GS1 standard for sure. Coding system for tracking and tracing products. And people have talked about recalls, etc. So that's kind of the one strategy. The second is this authentication that I've just shared with you, and then the third is blockchain, and this was mentioned briefly earlier on. The way that we're looking at this is not to try and take our whole supply chain and throw it all into a blockchain type environment. For a number of reasons, that just doesn't make sense and it won't work. Number 1, you wouldn't have manufacturers happy to share information with each other. Besides the fact that it's anti-competitive and there are a whole lot of rules against that, I don't think Novartis would be happy for Pfizer to see their pricing, for example. So from our perspective, when we think about what role blockchain potentially plays, it's more around how do we create an environment where certain permissions are enabled for the information, and how do we partition the information that it becomes consumable to specific audiences. So for example, if we pick up a problem in the supply chain, and I forget who said this, but someone made the great distinction between when you involve the regulators, I think that's if it's a poor quality product versus if there's a a fake product in the supply chain when it maybe more becomes a law enforcement issue. But the way that we're thinking about this is you would put the relevant information into an environment that is then shared across stakeholders that are not necessarily stakeholders in our supply chain. So, for example, regulators and law enforcement are not part of our supply chain, right? We're talking to manufacturers, distributors, logistics service providers, and then on the consumer side of the product. But when it comes to authenticating product, picking up excursions, etc., there's a different stakeholder group. And so that's where we think implementing a blockchain type environment becomes sensible. So we create an environment where we can share information with the relevant stakeholders with information that relates specifically to them, not everything. That makes some sense. So you'll be delighted to know this is the second last slide. So what are we actually implementing? We're thinking about this in 3 ways. Operational visibility, and this is where the real heavy lift for us is. There's configuration of existing ERP systems that we're busy with at the moment. There's obviously, we're fortunate in that we've partnered with a technology service provider, One Network, who have enabled in their technology serialization. So they're able to receive and exchange serialization data already in their platform, which is helpful. On the back of the work that the Department of Health in South Africa are doing, we will look to launch this capability in South Africa first, and then use the learnings of that to then move it across into our other operations throughout Africa. So that's kind of the first piece. The second piece is what we're calling serialization as a service, and the Optel people are going to go crazy in a second. But the idea here is that there are a number of barriers for manufacturers to implement patient pack serialization. If you're a major manufacturer or a global multinational manufacturer, the financial incentives are well known and well in place, and you'll just kind of get on and do this. But when you get down to local level manufacturing, when the volumes just aren't there, then implementing, putting these printers on manufacturing lines, etc., becomes a big ask. And so that's kind of the one part. The other part is that we're going to have some of our manufacturer clients are just simply not going to be ready to meet the requirements of some of these government tenders that are coming up. And so the idea is that we would be providing serialization on their behalf as a service. And so Rob raised a couple of good points about whether we need a manufacturing license to be able to do this, and we'll have to have a little bit of a closer look at local regulations. But the idea, this is sort of some of the things that we're looking to do at the moment, and we're kind of in the process of doing this right now in South Africa. Then the third piece, and it's been talked about a little bit, but I just want to maybe emphasize this a little bit, which is what we're calling above market visibility, which is this ability to take all this data that's moving right throughout the supply chain. And remember that even within the supply chain, Imperial Logistics is only one little sliver of this, right? There's a whole lot of things happening upstream. There's a whole lot of stuff happening downstream that we're not directly involved with. But we really do need to have the ability to sit on top of this control tower and be able to actually track and trace what's going on and where there are issues and where there are problems. And so, what does that look like? And who is going to try and comb through 4 billion lines of code and figure out whether it's all legit, whether it's right, whether it's in the right market? Did something, enter the supply chain that shouldn't? It's been talked about already, but we're talking about a $1 trillion industry, the pharmaceutical market. The Africa market currently is about $22 billion. At 10 or 11% of fake drugs, it is a healthy incentive for people to want to jump into these supply chains and put their junk in, because it's worth billions of dollars. And if you put that into rands or local currency, it's the financial incentive to want to do this is just huge. So why wouldn't you? And so we think that investing in this ability, which we think needs things like artificial intelligence or some kind of machine learning to be able to actually do this effectively and pick up in a speedy way how we would pick up on these issues, we think is a very important part of this. So in conclusion, key goal for us is patient safety. The reason that we're implementing this is to try and manage the complexity and the quantity, the sheer volume of what's going to be running through our digital platform. I've talked about the partitioning and permissibility to relevant stakeholders is going to be a key part of this. Just to reemphasize the urgency, the faster we make everyone in the supply chain drive or implement these standards, and we get them on patient packs to be able to consume them through what we're doing and what many of you all are doing to share this information is really, really important. So please, a call to action there to keep going. I love the idea. I think Madam from FM Hacker said, we need regulatory leadership, and I think that's absolutely right. And then what we're implementing from an operations perspective. And the one thing that probably isn't on this slide is the GS1 compliance. If we use that as the standard, I don't see a way of doing any of this in any sensible way if you do not have a common language to translate this information across. So it's kind of a ticket to the game. We're seeing it as if you don't do that, then you really can't take this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Clinton, to share your perspective from the practical implementation and giving us some time back, which I can give you to have a little bit more relaxed lunch now. Before we go into the lunch, can I remind everybody, first of all, that we will have tomorrow afternoon a Q&A session in much smaller groups for those who want to discuss in a more intimate environment with the experts. If you have questions, also put them already at the booth out there. The second thing, which I remind everybody really after lunch, again, we meet in the 2 rooms. The thinking will continue the discussions. In the other part, we will concentrate on the basics of identification and barcoding. What is a GTIN? How is it constructed? What are barcodes? What is needed? In the first session and in the second session, we will concentrate on global data standards and data sharing, also something which is very important. And last not least, we will see you all tonight at the networking event. I heard from the organizers that the buses, as I said, are leaving here at 7 o'clock. So on the way back, they will also pass by the other hotels. So if you're in other hotels, you will be brought back also. And tomorrow we start at 9 o'clock tomorrow, even if we dance through the night, okay? So train all this and see you tonight and have a really good afternoon sessions. Thank you so much. Enjoy lunch now.